All right, I got my guy Bryce Kenny on the show. He's a professional monster truck driver, motivational speaker, and newly published author of the book Geared for Life, Making the Shift into Your Full Potential. Bryce, welcome to the show, brother.
Hey, what's up, Joel? Thanks for having me on. I'm excited about this one.
Really excited to have you on. I was telling you offline how my kids are huge monster truck and just car guys, and so I've really gotten into monster trucks recently, and I have all these questions for you. But before we even dive into some of your history there, I was just reading your book, and I'm like, okay, people don't write books unless they have really something important to say. So for you, what was the impetus? What was the, like, I got to get this information out there?
Well, and to your point, I think we all feel like, oh, maybe I'll write a book one day, but you think to yourself, surely I need to be an expert on a topic. And I've come to realize that, I'm not some doctorate or, some PhD student with how the cells work with the blood, or something like that, right? I'm a guy that I will never boast to have the secrets to life because I don't think that there are any. But I'm really good. I am an expert at finding my next gear and finding the way to get unstuck and just going from first to second. I think I've also realized that's what I'm really good at with other people is sitting across from them and going, okay, where are you at now? Where do you want to be long term, right? What is the finish line for you? That's all great, the visionary and having a vision and going after the big goals. But what do we do today just to take one step forward to that? And I'm really great at that, and not from a boastful standpoint, but I do think it's a learned skill. So Monster Jam is all wrapped up in that. Monster Jam to me was a gear that I had to find. And when I say the word gear, it's really foundational beliefs. And it's the ability to leverage the things we believe to drive our actions towards that ultimate goal that we're after. And so, it is funny, man. But you talk about your kids being big fans of monster trucks. As long as they're not cheering for Gravedigger, Joel, just tell me that Mohawk Warrior has been voiced at some point in the Evans household. Is that true?
Mohawk has definitely been voiced. Gravedigger is a favorite. One of my sons loves snakes, so I think there's a snake one which we don't often see, but that's also a favorite.
Okay, I'll forgive you then. I'll stay on.
But
the
you're going to be their
podcast.
new favorite. I mentioned that we're going to be interviewing you today, and
Yeah.
they're like, "Which one is he?" I'm like, "The Great Clips, the Mohawk." And they're like, "Okay." So,
Well, you've almost got a Mohawk going too there, and I just want
Mohawk,
to tell you,
yeah.
I mean, it's like we're kind of look like we almost could be related here. So I'm a fan.
yes, brother. Okay, dude. Here's something I really want to ask you because to be a professional at the top level of the game, and in this case, monster trucks, when I go there, I'm just entertained. I see you guys crash. I see you guys do things, and I'm like, oh, okay, like, great. I'm reading your book, and you're telling me all the devastation, like, oh, I completely blew it. Like, my team was angry at me. I just caused $60,000 of damage by doing this, and we don't see any of that. So how did you even become a monster? Like, that's a kid's dream to become a monster truck driver. But then it's like one thing to actually do it. Like, so what were the steps like you took to get there? And then tell some of us, like, it seems way more cutthroat than any of us can imagine.
Yeah, well, and to your point, I mean, I think that. So first of all, I'll say this: I went to Monster Jam University, Joel. And that's a real place, all right? They even gave me a diploma, which I thought was just outrageous, and I did not keep it. I left it in the hotel. I was like, guys, this is kind of ridiculous, all right? But now I talk about it all the time. I regret that I don't have the diploma anymore. But anyway, it's amazing the test facility that Monster Jam has. And they called me up one day because I was actually in a corporate job. Because I grew up in professional drag racing, and that dream, I always like to say, it kind of died. It went away. It was during the last recession, and finally I had to look at our team and my grandfather, who was the team owner, and I was like, man, don't keep this stuff for me. Like, he built that career over 60 years, started back in the 1950s on old abandoned airstrips. And here I was, a 21-year-old kid, working 7 different jobs to keep that dream alive and chase after that, and I failed. And so we kind of put that to the side, and I said, I'm going to go create wealth and become a team owner and do what my grandfather did, right? And so I went into corporate America. I was placing CFOs and CEOs into private equity-backed companies. All right. And as a corporate headhunter, I know it sounds so bizarre. It's like going from professional drag racing to executive recruiting and then to Monster Jam, but that is my pathway. And so, but I remember when I got out of drag racing, I had a friend that said, you need to talk to Monster Jam. And honestly, I had never even been to a Monster Jam event. I had never been to a monster truck show, didn't care about them. Still to this day, I've never been to a NASCAR race. My whole world was drag racing. And so when I first called them, they said, well, have you been to an event before? I'm like, well, no. They said, well, you should go out. And I remember seeing the first time, you never forget the first time you see a 12-foot tall Monster Jam truck fly through the air, right? That's a core memory. And I watched that, and I called them back and I said, I'm interested. And they're like, well, timing's actually bad for us, but if it's ever okay, we'll call you. And so I went back into my corporate job, my corporate career. 4 years later, they call me back. And they're like, hey, timing is better for us. Would you be interested in coming to Monster Jam University? And I had the same response everyone else does. Like, what is that? But and my actual first response, though, too, was also, how much is this going to cost me?
Yeah.
Because everything that my dream in professional drag racing required was such a huge investment of money that I was looking at it going, man, I don't know if that's important enough to me to invest, $20,000 just for an experience. And they said, no, we've got the equipment, and we have the biggest motorsports fleet in the world. Like, we got all the stuff for you. And I'm thinking, so just a flight and a hotel? I remember negotiating with myself going, man, for $1,000, I might do that. They kind of got frustrated, and they're like, no, we'll buy you a flight and a hotel. Can you get off of work just for a couple days to come up to our test facility to Monster Jam University? And I went, of course I can do that, right? I mean, who would say no to that kind of experience? And I did not have any expectation that it would go anywhere. I thought, for the life of me, I just remember thinking, one day I'll be in a Buffalo Wild Wings 10 years from now, and I'll get to nudge a buddy when it comes up on TV and go, dude, I drove one of those things one time. And that's as far as I thought it would go. And man, here it's been 8 years since that experience, and it's been my full-time career for the last 7 years. And I left the corporate career behind, which is something I go through a lot in my book on making that decision. And I took a 30% pay cut to do it. And the why behind doing that, is a bigger conversation. But Monster Jam University allowed me to go up and learn how to drive one of these trucks. And nowadays, if I want to try something new, Joel, it's not something I go up to the test site and try out. I do it in front of 50,000 people, and you're either a hero or a zero right there in a big football stadium here in America. But it's a lot of fun.
Yeah. So talk about, again, what don't people understand? Because what the vibe I get from the book is that you go out there, and if you make a mistake, if you make enough of mistakes in a row, you're done.
Yes.
Sorry, Monster Jam. We like you, Bryce. You're a nice guy, but we're going to need somebody else because you're continuing to fail. So just talk about some of those pressures and some of the things that people may not understand and why your book geared for this shift, some of the principles you used and how that kind of helped you.
Man, I will say that I never thought Monster Jam would be part of the what I do, I guess. And I'm a big believer that, we get so focused on what we want to do or what we're not doing enough of that we forget the who we want to be in the process. And so my big decision-making moment on making this shift over into Monster Jam and finding this Monster Jam gear was just that. I was struggling with this. Great Clips had come around and had sponsored a truck called Mohawk Warrior, and they picked me as the driver, and I kept pushing them away. In fact, I told Monster Jam no twice, saying I can't do that because I had a really good life in my corporate career. And remember, my thing was, if it takes me 40 years, I'll go create wealth and become a team owner. And so, Monster Jam was kind of getting in the way of that. And I didn't want something, I couldn't tell if the Monster Jam opportunity was a good career or a good shift to make or a distraction. Right? And I think all of us are that way. Like we're also struggling with that question about, is this really all there is to life when our head hits the pillow at night? We struggle with it. Every man does. Like, surely there's more to life and all this stuff. And I was in that moment as well. And I remember I was in my garage, though. I was struggling with this because Monster Jam had come to me and said, look, they've picked you as the driver. What's it going to take? And I finally did a deep dive into Great Clips. I found their the FDD, the disclosure document for their franchisees, and like I went through that company. But I was in my garage. I was looking around the shop walls, on my walls, and I noticed everything on my walls had something to do with my dream in racing. Like it had something, a memory I made, a picture of me and my grandfather, my first time slip of setting a track record at the track I grew up on, and us going 300 miles an hour for the first time, and all these amazing things. And what was not on the wall was some picture of a CEO I had placed, right? Mm-hmm. And so what happened was I remembered in that moment the who I wanted to become, and And who I always believed I am and put on this earth to become is someone who uses the platform of motorsports to impact the world. And so Monster Jam, just for Monster Jam's sake, at that moment in time, that probably wouldn't have fit. But because I remembered my focal point of becoming who I wanted to be in the process of this crazy thing called life, it did fit. And so that's why I'm a big believer that when the who is right, when we're focused on the best version of ourselves, on who we want to become, the what tends to fall in line, and like it's easier to make decisions because you can figure out if that what aligns with the who. And because all of us spend so much time talking about our why, and I've got my why, and I'm a big believer in understanding why I'm doing something, but we've forgotten that identity process that we have in our own lives. And so I think that's a perspective shift that we all have to make before we start shifting gears and going from first to second to third, and finding that fastest gear we've got in life. We've got to have the right perspective. And without the who being correct, the what really struggles. And so Monster Jam for me, it was the what that allowed and supported who I ultimately wanted to become and making an impact on this world. And so I don't regret it at all. Like taking that 30% pay cut, doing what we've done for the last 7 years, man, it's gotten better every single year that I've been a part of this, and I've found out a lot. But you talked about the pressures. There's such a cutthroat industry, and there's nothing, I don't believe there's anything more fragile than a career in motorsports. And I also knew, I talk about failing in drag racing, but I'll be honest, the things I learned through those failures are what have propped me up now in Monster Jam to become so successful, because I understand what a brand wants. I understand how to be an ambassador and to be effective for a company. Great Clips is a $1.7 billion organization. Right? To be able to sit with their president and CEO and work with 1,000 different franchisees, that has to take the right mindset. And that's what's enabled us to continue to grow this partnership as well, which is also what I'm very passionate about. But there's 250 people, men, women, everybody that's come through Monster Jam University that they do want me to fail, because they would love for me to get X'd out and they take over my seat. And my goal is to be so effective as a brand ambassador that no one thinks they can do what I do, right? Because if I can go and do that and generate that kind of value, and I'm always adding value, and that's really as simple as our careers are. Like in whatever job we're in, you're either adding value or you're taking value away from that organization. That's it. You're never really in a neutral state. You're either adding or you're taking. And as long as I'm adding to it, man, I want to keep putting things in that bucket, in that Monster Jam bucket, that makes it so hard to replace me. And that's what I'm after. I mean, that's the dream and the goal, and the aspect of what drives me and motivates me to work so hard too.
Yeah, that's so cool. I love what you're saying, because I didn't tell you this, but I lost my job almost 2 years ago as a first responder, and during the mandates and everything. And, I could have done something easy. I could have stayed there. I could have done a lot of things. But like you said, I think it was that question of like, yeah, but here's a chance to really, really align with my truth and who do I want to be. And I have an opportunity, and I have a chance to lose it all and not go back to the safe 9-to-5 job. But man, what would life look like if I did that? And most people are struggling, I think, with this idea of, because again, it's safer just to stay comfortable in your corporate job. That's a way safer thing to do. You're going to take a 30. You already know, like this logically, I'm taking a 30% cut. Maybe I'll make more money. Maybe I won't.
Yeah.
And so would that be like the first steps you'd tell anybody? Because I think a lot of people are confused right now, and they're all looking. We meet a lot of people that go through the quote unquote midlife crisis, right? And they're trying to find their new identity. They're trying to figure out like, who do I really want to be? I'm going to be dead by by the time I'm like 76. That's like average life expectancy. And you want to know that you lived, you loved, you mattered. And so that's the question you say everybody should start asking right now is like, hey, the question is about who, not what, not your why, who.
Yeah. Who do you want to be in when you hit that 76-year mark, right? I mean, who is it that who do you want to be spoken about as, I guess, at your funeral and things like that? I think a lot of those things should drive us, but I am almost angry at something that I feel like society is pushing that I don't think a lot of people realize that they've bought into, but it's this idea of chasing happiness. Like I think it is the worst advice ever. I think when people are like, oh, yeah, well, does it make you happy? Okay, good. Then go and do it. I think happiness is not only overrated, but it is the worst goal ever. And now as a disclaimer, I don't think unhappiness is the goal either, right? I just believe happiness is a byproduct of something much bigger. And so while the world's saying go chase your happiness, and I'm saying, look, when you find your purpose and you live in your purpose, happiness is always going to be there. Otherwise, if happiness is the only goal, happiness is so fleeting that's why your head's hitting the pillow and you're like, man, is this really it? Is this all there is? Surely that I'm missing something. And I'm also, Joel, I'm so passionate about understanding too, like, and helping people understand, we've made finding our purpose way harder than it should be. Way harder. I don't think it's some enigma, right? I don't think it's some like puzzle piece that, maybe by the time I'm 69, I'll figure out what my purpose here on life. I'm a big believer in three. That's like, first of all, number one, step to finding your purpose, you got to believe that you have one, right? And step number two is understanding what you're passionate about. And some people say, well, doesn't that mean happiness? No. Because I'm passionate about driving Monster Jam trucks, but trust me, it doesn't always make me happy. To your point you alluded to a little bit ago, I mean, I've ended up in the hospital because of anxiety that I had at an event where I wasn't doing well. And that's when it got my attention. But I was still passionate about driving and being a professional driver. And so step number two is remembering our passions. And I think a lot of people, by the time they're 21, they hit the real world, right? They're that junior year of college, and they're like, man, I don't know what to major in, and they're afraid that they're making some 40-year decision. They just go get a marketing degree just because. And then that's the
communications,
first part.
actually. It's a communication degree.
Communication, yeah, or PE, right?
Yeah.
And no offense to all of those things, but everyone, we were all in that mode where we were like, we're afraid to make a decision, and we gave up on our passions right then and there because we weren't sure how to insert our passion into that life, and then we just got put into this rabbit hole or this gerbil wheel, I guess, and that's called our corporate lives. And all of a sudden you're 35, and that's when you're asking that question: is this really it? So remembering what we are passionate about, go back as far as you need to. Be like, what really lights my fire? What do I love? And it doesn't have to be something so deep like an industry. It could be taking care of animals. I don't know. It could be something very much more simple than we make it. But that's step number two, is reignite your passion, right? And then step number three is to equip that passion. And maybe that is going back to school. Maybe that's starting a podcast, Joel, right? Maybe that's, but equipping it, learning the stuff that you've had to learn through editing podcasts and stuff like that. You weren't passionate about editing, most likely. You were passionate about creating stuff like this and content like this and getting positive message. And I know the old name of the podcast was The Hack's Life. It's like helping people break through and live this life untamed. Well, I know that's what you're passionate about. Well, you still had to go and equip that passion to find your purpose. And that's what I'm a big believer in. Like, equip your passion, find your purpose. And so those are really those three steps. Believe you got a purpose. Go back and remember what you're passionate about and that fire in your chest, and then equip it. And I'm telling you, your purpose will show up. And so, and while the world asks you to go be happy, I say reject that and go find your purpose, and all these things will be added to you as well. That's kind of my perspective with it. And man, I don't regret that at all, because I get to lead my family that way, and my 6-year-old, my 8-year-old, my wife, my 2-year-old, like, we get to look at this, and I love seeing their passions come to fruition and being able to help them equip those passions. I think that's my job even as a dad.
Yeah, so key. Speaking of that, you mentioned this really hit home for me. One of the things that I struggled with was my marriage and my family life with my boys. And it's something that I've really focused on in the last 2 years because, I was maybe doing great career-wise or maybe doing great fitness-wise and health-wise, but this part of my life was just not dialed in. And you talk about identity a lot in the book, and I love this, and I'm going to even read it. It says, wanting to be a good father to my kids, it's identity. It's not effort. But the desire to be a good father drives my effort to go outside and play with remote-controlled cars with my son. You said, if I skip the desire part, and I just went straight to this checklist mentality, like, got to go play with my kids, check, did that. I might go outside and play with my son for a while, but I wouldn't be doing it with the heart or the kindness. And when we lead with our identity, the right action becomes automatic. Dude, talk about identity just in general and how that's so powerful for anyone that wants to shift gears in life. And then even just being a dad, I love that because that's one of my passions right now is being an amazing elite husband and father.
Yeah, I talk about having a time traveler's perspective in the book, to your point. And I remember thinking, and I know I stole this from somebody out there in the world, right? And thinking, one day my kids will be grown. One day they'll be out of the house. And I put myself in that scenario of being 55 years old. And, my kids aren't calling me every day and things like that. And I'll think back to that moment when my son was 6 years old and came up, Dad, would you go out and play RC cars with me? And at 55 years old, I know I would give anything to be a time traveler and to go back just for one day and be able to go out there with my son and run that RC car around. And I won't be able to because I'll be 55 and he'll be long gone and out of the house. And if I can have that perspective now, and knowing that one day I would give I would allow myself to pass away earlier if I could get one day back with my son. I know that that's what my mentality will be. So why wait to that point? And it's not even about feeling regret. It's about understanding that, man, when I'm 55, whether I go out here and play RC cars today or not, I'm still going to hope and wish that I could go back for right now. But I'm in this moment today when he's asking that. And so I think a time traveler's perspective is what we all really need is to be able to do that. And that does drive our identity because, to your point, I want to be someone who is a great dad. I want to be someone who empowers and helps my kids equip their passions. And that drives the effort. And I'm a big believer that is a gear that we have to find. Right? And that's what Geared for Life is all about. I think that when we find our identity and we're understanding what our purpose is and we better clarify who we want to be, that better version of ourselves. And I think that we're able to go into this gear that we never knew that we had and being that best dad. Because it's not about having a good opinion of, like, other people having a good opinion of us. Like, I want my son to love me, right? I want him to have a good opinion of me. But knowing that one day we'll look back on all of this with a lot of opinions on how we put our effort into that, and the what we did seems to take care of itself when we better clarify who we want to become in the end. And so I think that for people going through this book, let's say, or this life, like, put the book on the shelf, pun intended, I guess, for a moment. Like, I told my publisher, I was like, I'm not going to be a guy that's just trying to sling books and sell a bunch of books. But
by the way, nobody makes money on books, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wrote the book to be a tool because I want it to be something where by the time someone gets to the end of Geared for Life, like, they'll steal some of my gears, right? They'll take 3 or 4, and really your gears are your foundational beliefs, like I said before. But you'll steal some of my gears. But my goal is that, by the time you close the back cover, you've found some of your own gears and you've decided, what do I really believe? Because we're going into a time in history. Look at the news. Look at everything going on overseas. Look at the stuff coming here to America. And we're looking at this and going, if you don't know what you believe and why you believe that, then you're going to get smoked. You're going to get chewed up and spit out. And I'm passionate about that because I think belief drives our actions. And so if you believe that your best version can be the best dad that Keegan Kenny has ever had, or that God gave him to me and my family so that I could be his dad and his father and to teach him, if I believe that, that's going to drive the who I want to become. And then the what is really easy, which is get your butt up off the couch and go play RC cars with this kid. But find that gear, and sometimes it's a purposeful decision to shift into that gear. And that's what we've got to realize. Like, we're so reactive because we're chasing happiness so much that we're reacting to what life is giving us. It's like sometimes you're out of first gear, right? You're first gear, you're on the highway, and if a car didn't shift into second, it's going to blow up the engine. The car is, if it's on first gear and you hit the highway on the on-ramp and you're at 7,500 RPM and it's not going into second, bad things are going to happen. Well, that's what our life is. We talk about corporate burnout. It's like, look, dude, you've been in first gear for 25 years, or you felt like you've been stuck in neutral for years. So don't feel like you've got to find fifth gear. We just have to help you find second or third, whatever gear you're in now. And then also, once you've got those gears set, understanding that you can't stay in fifth gear forever. If you're on the highway and you take an exit ramp and you come up to a mountain path with a bunch of rocks and stuff like that, you better shift down back into first. So knowing what gear to shift into and the right time to shift into it is critical if we're going to build that kind of momentum. And our goal in life should be momentum and holding momentum as long as we can. But we've forgotten about all that because we've bought into this lie. Well, if it makes you happy, do it. And if you're unhappy, change everything. It's like maybe, but that's a terrible goal, right? There's so much more to our life than just that.
Yeah, really, really, really powerful stuff. And I mean, I love, and even just your story, right? When you finally, I think, embraced the identity of being a monster truck driver, because even starting off, like you said, it was like, man, I don't know, like, is this still a wise move? And you're half foot in, right? But then another foot's like halfway out, just in case I have plan B. And it seems like when you really committed, this is my plan A, plan B is plan A, and I'm going to go all in. This is who I am. I'm going to be successful at this. That is when you came into full alignment and things started just happening to you. It's like when your identity was this, wow, all these opportunities came. When the pandemic hit, you mentioned in the book, when the pandemic hit, well, there's no more race car. There's no more monster truck driving. But guess what? You figured out a way like, no, but I still want to, my who is impacting the world and changing lives and motivating people. And then you reached out to Great Clips and you started doing all this motivational speaking and people actually liked it. And it was just going back to the identity piece. So powerful. I think people really need to embrace that chapter and just go deep on their identity because it's so impactful. And I see so many people lost because they don't know who they are and they don't even know what they stand for. And so when the tough times come up, like you said, they don't know what to do because they never really stood for anything.
Yeah, that's right. And I'll tell you this because it'll drive home exactly what you're saying. Let me tell you about my very first backflip I ever did and how terrible it was. Okay. I turned the corner and they told me, hey, you're going to hit the backflip tonight. We got Great Clips in the stands, 250 people from the corporate office. The president's here. It was one of my first ever events in the Great Clips truck. And they said, we want you to go hit. And I'm like, well, how do you do it? And I'm like, look, when you hit that dumpster, just give it all the throttle you can, get the truck to rotate. I'm like, thumbs up, let's do it. And so I turned the corner and I kind of put my foot up on the brake to steady the truck and get it straightened out. Well, I was not aware of just how abrupt it would feel hitting a wall. I know that's crazy, right? But we hit.
I think you think in a monster truck, you're like, how bad could it be? I got a lot of padding here. It's a big truck, right?
Yeah, right. And these shocks are incredible and all that stuff. Well, I hit the wall, but I had not dropped my foot off away from the brake. I wasn't on the brake, but it was just up near the brake that I had used just to get the truck turned and lined up for the flip. And I didn't drop it away. So when I hit that wall, all it did was, it was so abrupt, it threw my body forward. It also threw my foot forward just enough to tap the brake. Just enough. I didn't even realize I did it until afterwards. That's how subtle it was. But it killed all my momentum and I just flopped, right? Well, man, that is the perfect example of what most of us do in our goals and our dreams and what we're wanting to become in this life is because we've got one foot on the gas, but we still have one foot up there on the brake as well. And identifying what the brake is critical. Identifying, look, what's your backup plan? You said plan B. What is your backup plan? Is it another opportunity? Is it another career? Is it going back to school? Is it, whatever the excuse is? The only way that this backflip stuff works, if your goal is a backflip metaphorically, right? It is dangerous to do a half commitment. It's dangerous to keep the plan B in place. It's dangerous to keep your foot up with your foot up near the brake because that's the only time I've seen anybody get hurt in a monster truck is on a backflip when they under rotated, and I watched a guy break his neck that way, right? It was a half commitment. And so our goals are the same way, man. If we're going to go out there and we're going to do something really special and we're going to find momentum and we're going to make the fastest run we can in life, we've got to drop that foot way off of the brake and we've got to make sure that the only thing that we're doing is going all in with that throttle pedal, giving it all the effort we can. Otherwise, we're at the risk of flopping as well.
Wow. So good. So good. Hey, you mentioned burnout. And that's something I come across a lot. I think a lot of us, especially right now, like you just mentioned, we're putting our pedal to the metal and we're trying, and we're putting a lot of effort. And it gets taxing. And it's like, when are we going to see the light at the tunnel? And I think a lot of us say, well, I'm going to keep working this hard, but then until I get this. And one day this is going to happen. And then I can stop. But we know that doesn't work. Like you and I both know, like we've tried that tactic. It doesn't work. What are some strategies or what would you tell people? Like, here's some things you can actually really do that's going to help with burnout and recovery.
Yeah, I think understanding what refuels us is a big thing, and again, to stay on a car theme here, I guess. I think the best drivers in the world, the only reason that they're willing to really exert themselves and to give everything they've got around the racetrack is they know exactly where their pit stops are going to be. They know who's going to put fuel back in the tank. Well, imagine being on a back road somewhere in your car driving, and you don't see a gas station for miles, and all of a sudden your gas light comes on. You're going to be super conservative on the way you drive, and all of a sudden you're going to go, man, I've only got so much left in the tank, and that's what we all experience at different points of that corporate burnout. And go back to the basics of, okay, if I've got this, I've got this cup of coffee right here in my mug. And if this is the last coffee I'm ever going to drink, I'm going to sip it and enjoy it. But if I know that my source of coffee is right there in my kitchen to be able to go in and to refuel my cup, I don't care to drink the rest of this mug. And we're the same way. And so if you understand where your faucet is, you're willing to pour out the glass of water that much faster. If you're a race car and you know where the pit stops are going to be, you're willing to run as hard as you possibly can. And so that begs the question then, what's a pit stop? Like, what is refueling? And it can be as simple as this podcast. There's a lot of people that are avid listeners of your show, and it's because it probably fuels them back up. Maybe it is going out and playing with your kids. And if that's something that fuels you back up, go out and do it. Maybe it's prayer. Maybe it's reading a book or listening to Audible or something like that. But it's shocking to me how few people in the world understand what's actually going to fill them back up. And that's why they're unwilling to go so hard. So burnout, I believe, actually is the result of believe it or not, of conserving. That sounds so backwards. But I actually believe it's because you're conserving, you're trying to get to the finish line without shifting. And maybe the shift is, look, go back in, get refueled, and you can come back out with a full tank of gas, and you're going to go harder than you ever went before, but it's just been a long time. And don't misunderstand what I'm saying. I'm not saying, we've taken this mental health idea as well way too far, and I think it actually ties it. Instead of happiness, now we're calling it mental health. And I do think mental health is very important, but most people don't have a mental health problem. They got a heart problem, not physically, right? But more emotionally, more spiritually. And they've forgotten what they believe, and they're on the wrong train track, and they know that that's taking them out to the middle of the desert or Idaho, Joel. But it's taking them out in the middle of nowhere, and they're scared. And they're calling it corporate burnout. They're calling it mental health. And I know people are tired. I know they're exhausted. Take half a second to remind yourself of what fuels you back up, and make sure to shift into that gear of filling yourself back up. And when you do that, that's where corporate burnout seems to, in my opinion, it seems to settle down a little bit, and we're able to do it. And that's what enables you to get in the position to then shift into that next gear that you really need to find. Because chances are, if you're exhausted and you're burnt out this bad, you've been in the same gear for far too long, and it's time that maybe you go into a creative gear, right? Or maybe a getting results gear, or maybe it's more about preparation. And there's times that I've got it. I told my wife last week, I finally came off the road from a lot of speaking engagements, and I told her, I said, I'm just tired of prepping. I don't want to look at PowerPoint, or I don't want to look at any of this stuff anymore for a couple of days. Like, I need to get into a creative gear. And that refueled me. And man, yesterday was the most productive day I've had in a long time, because I was able to shift out of that. I was able to kind of fuel myself back up. And here I am. I'm ready to go again.
Yeah. It also seems, too, if you do refill and you come back and you're still overwhelmed, you're still burnt out, then maybe it goes back to identity. Maybe it's because you're pushing in the gear, but it's the wrong gear completely to begin with, and you got to do an identity shift. You got to maybe look deeper and ask that who question, because you could be pushing as much as you want, as you know, and you could be refilling and going on vacations, and you still feel unfulfilled. So I'm guessing that's what you say.
The what will never fix the who, but the who can fix the what.
I love that. Yes. Oh, that's going to be a soundbite right there.
There you go.
Hey, man, I wanted to ask you, too, I know it's getting kind of close to the top of the hour, but I was wondering if you could just share kind of, I looked at what you're doing, and you're up to a lot of, like, charity and giving back, and you have this foundation, you do Live Like Warriors. Could you just kind of speak on that and what that's all about, and how people can learn more about that?
Imagine being a Monster Jam driver and getting to interact with these families that are, they love the sport. It gives them life. It's a lot for a lot of people. It's how they get refueled, is just coming out and being a part of the culture. And I love that. Well, I also get those messages that are from families going through cancer. And my own niece went through pediatric cancer. And so, I was in the room when the doctor came in and said, hey, it's cancer. And, I watched my sister-in-law fall apart from it. And all of us, we just broke down. And so I get these messages a lot. And because of that, it's not people asking for money, but what happens is I find really specific needs out there that these families have. And it could be something, for instance, the first thing I heard, and this was almost 8 years ago now, there was a little boy named Ollie. And Ollie was going through it, and his family sent me a message just because he said, hey, because my hair's falling out, can you cut it into a mohawk for a day before you have to shave it all off so I can be Mohawk Warrior?
Wow.
Well, if you got that message, Joel, you would be totally gutted, especially as a dad. And so I messaged them back, and my question to them was not, oh, what do you guys need? I asked them, how does Ollie pass the time in the hospital rooms? Because that's what I remembered being through it with my niece, was how much downtime there was, how much they just have to sit there and wait and all this stuff. And I said, how does he like to pass the time? Is he a tablet kid? Does he watch shows or what have? They said, actually, now that you say that, he loves building Legos. And so I thought, well, let me put it out there to my social media following and just see if anyone wants to send a Lego set. Well, I had to shut it off within an hour, because I got 15 people that said, hey, just order it off Amazon. It's on its way. And I'm like, well, all of a sudden I'm going to be swimming in these Lego sets. And so we packed up 15 Lego sets and actually drove over to meet them over in Nashville and got to meet Ollie. Well, that made me realize, a lot of us are tired of giving to stuff and we don't know where the money goes. Or you're giving, how many organizations now, nonprofits, all it's doing is paying some salary or printer ink or rent on a building. And those things are not immoral, right? It's good that really good people are running these nonprofits, but I'm tired of that. And I just said, let's start something where every dollar that gets donated goes to the cause, and it's just crowdfunding, right? It's crowdfunding for really specific needs. And for the longest time, I didn't even have it as a nonprofit officially, because, if we were raising something that was $2,000, well, when I got the $2,000, we just bought the thing. So it was never, it was never needed to come into an organization. The only reason we started do that, and we actually formed an official 501c3, is because of the corporate partnerships that need you to be a 501c3 that now we've developed. But we are a volunteer army that makes a coordinated effort to fill very specific needs in our world. And man, I'm having so much fun, Joel, doing that, because it makes and we've done everything from a $1,500 piece of furniture up to a $20,000 vehicle that we did for a family we found out was Ubering 2 hours one way to their cancer treatments. I put it out on social media just thinking, man, someone's got a car that their college-age kids just came home from, don't need anymore. And I got a call from Chris Angel, the magician, mind freak, right? Guy from Vegas.
Yeah.
And he goes, hey, look, and his son has been through 2 bouts of pediatric cancer. And so Chris called me and he said, look, don't get them some crappy vehicle. Like, I'll send you 20 grand. Just go get them something reliable. Wow. And so we've had all these amazing things happen. And so, yeah, I've got something called the Warrior Chain. And if people want to be a part of that, that's our volunteer army, as I call it. And so go to livelikewarriors.com, sign up for the Warrior Chain. Of course, that's all free. I shouldn't even have to say that. But it's like the bat signal in the sky. And when we find a need and something that a family needs, I put that out in the sky, and we usually get it raised within an hour or two. And it keeps people a part of something that's bigger than themselves. And that's probably, if someone asked me what my favorite gear is in the book that I write about, that I share, my favorite gear, it's becoming built for other people. And so I want to be somebody. I believe that if I take my eyes off myself and put them on other people, that good things will happen, and I'll get what I need, so to speak, as a result. And being able to just be there for others and help them in their time of need, like that's where the byproduct of happiness comes from for me, right? And so. But I would love for people to be part of that Warrior Chain and to truly kind of get off the sidelines and get involved. You can do more than you think you can do for others. And there's a lot of really good people and really good needs out there that we can go and do together if we're just willing to coordinate it. And that's what Live Like Warriors is all about.
Dude, I got chills just listening to you talk, and I want to tell you why. Because I was just thinking, reflecting on your journey here, and you mentioned, again, we go back to you shifting out of corporate life and getting into this job, this unknown, this 30% pay cut. That was known. Like, I'm going to make less money, but this is my dream. You follow the dream, You would have never been a best-selling author. You would have never started this charity. You would have never had the impact you did in the corporate world had you not done what you've done. So it just shines light on leaning in to those fears and just going all in and into that, asking that question again from the beginning, the who. I mean, so amazing.
Joel, everything good in my life has been on the other side of my comfort zone. Everything is on the other side of the comfort zone. And so if people just go out there and try to kill their comfort zone every day, look for the ways to inconvenience themselves, right? And I heard a really wealthy guy tell me that a long time ago. He said, wealth is based on inconvenience. Everyone looks for the convenient thing. Go look for something inconvenient and watch what happens. Man, that little tidbit is worth this whole podcast if someone's still listening to it after all. That in and of itself is going to change someone's life today, because it's that perspective shift that they need to go and build on making a life of inconvenience and watch the good stuff happen. But go kill the comfort zone, man, and watch life start to change.
I love that. I actually underlined that in the book. I wanted to kind of wrap things up, but talk about, just briefly, and I don't give it away, but talk about the last two chapters, why you were so adamant that that the publisher have the last two chapters of the book, and they were like, yeah, like, and you wanted it in the beginning, they wanted it in the end. Talk about that and just and why people need to read the entire book, because the last two chapters are the best.
Yeah, it was funny because I to your point, I went to the publisher and I was like, guys, I feel like our strongest points are at the end. And, what's the percentage of people that don't ever finish a book? Like, it's high. That they get halfway through and they move on and they pick up another book. And it's not because the first half of that book is boring. It's like, I think a lot of people just get, they almost switch gears and they think about something else, and all of a sudden they need a people skill book today, or someone gave them an investment book and they're onto that book. And so, I love the first half of the book as well. But the publisher said, well, the way that we're going to flow this book, and it's really kind of, it's almost like the going from first gear to seventh gear, and the movement of a car, like just getting started, and then the seventh gear is heading to the finish line type of thing. I said, well, that makes sense. But I love the last two chapters because it was the hardest to write. I voiced over the book on Audible. I voiced it all over, and I had to take like 3 breaks talking through that becoming built for others gear, because it was the rawest. I tell stories in that chapter that I've never told anybody in my life, and being able to walk through that and get it out, there was something therapeutic for me. But I also remember thinking, if I could leave one thing with my kids, it would be those last 2 chapters. If there were 2 gears that I hope my kids find, it's those last 2 gears. And I'll stand by that as well. I think it's a game-changing moment for any of us, and it allows us to really start to not only just find our purpose and such, because my purpose, finding your purpose gear that's actually pretty early on in the book. But those last 2 gears, man, you talk about getting to your deathbed with no regrets. Go find those last 2 gears I talk about, and watch what happens by the time you turn 75. You won't regret it.
Wow. Hey, I'm curious, before we wrap things up, what does a high performer like you do in terms of like rituals? Like some people have gratitude journals, and I have like a whole, visualization meditation process I do in the morning. What does a guy like you do typically?
That's a good question. I think the hardest thing for me is turning my brain off, because it's always on.
Yeah.
And so this is not this is not an indictment. It's funny, about the only way I can get to sleep is if I turn a TV show on. And there's a lot of like high performance that would say like, that's terrible. How do you do? I don't know. I will turn on The Office at night, because I love The Office, and I think it is the funniest show in the history of mankind. And I know every episode, so I'm not really watching it, and it'll shut my brain off, and I can actually go to sleep. Otherwise, I'll just lay there till 2 a.m. and thinking about everything else. But I say all of that not to recommend you living your life off of Netflix, but really to remember, like, what we think about is what we become. And being able to wake up in the morning before your feet hit the floor and remembering that who you want to become is everything. Starting with some wins. Like, don't hit the snooze button, because actually you're starting with a failure right there. And all of a sudden you want to get up at 6:45, you get up at 7:15. And because of that failure, you feel like a failure anyway. You go in, you grab a bar to jump in the car. You were planning on waking up and making an omelet. And that's failure number 2. You get a bar, you jump in your car, and you're 5 minutes late to work, and your goal was to be there 5 minutes early. Well, you all of a sudden before your day's even started, you got 3 failures. And no wonder by the time you hit lunch, you feel like a failure. And if you just start off those days with getting the first win as soon as your feet hit the floor and walking through that, man, now all of a sudden you're going through your day like a winner. So I'm a big believer in that first decision of the day, make it a win. And then let that win snowball to others. And I'm a big believer in try to do that every single morning.
Dude, I love that. Amazing. Man, okay, Bryce, I'm going to probably have to have you back on for round 2 because there's so many things we didn't get to, like finishing strong, and there's just so many things you had in the book that we didn't get to. But just for right now, tell everybody where they can find you, connect with you, get the book, all that kind of stuff. Where can they find you and find out what you're up to?
I appreciate that, Joel. And I would love to be back on. I love this podcast, love the show. But I do the most probably on social media, on Instagram and TikTok. It's like that necessary evil for all of us. But I love doing LinkedIn stuff as well. But Instagram is probably the easiest. Feel free, please DM me. I would love to hear what you think about the book. What gear was your favorite? And kind of your biggest takeaways from it. And the book's available wherever books are sold, right? Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, Amazon, of course, the great book giant, and even Audible. And I did voice it over, like I said before. So I think myself, I've never been into audiobooks, but now I'm kind of like, man, I would listen to a book if the author, voiced it over, because then they can add a little sarcasm where they meant to be sarcastic, and you can hear their story from their own voice. But yeah, we're everywhere books are sold, and man, look me up on Monster Jam. I mean, a lot of people out there, of course, if I'm coming to a city near you, please come to the pit party. I'd love to meet you in person, bring the family out, make some memories. And man, we're going to make a run at this finish line and go out there and hopefully, again, be that person that uses the platform of motorsports to impact the world.
So cool. Bryce Kenny, thanks for being on the show, brother. I appreciate you.
Oh, hey, Instagram is @WarriorBryce. I didn't drop that. @WarriorBryce. @WarriorBryce on TikTok and all those things. So thanks, Joe. I appreciate you having me on, man. It was a lot of fun, and I'm always willing to come on this show. It's awesome.
Absolutely. Let's do it again.